Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Your Excellency, President Ali, my brother, Mrs. Ali. Your Excellency, President Akufo-Addo, my other brother of Ghana. Your Excellency, President Santoki of Suriname, my other brother. And I'm looking for my older brother, Vice President Bharat Jagdeo, Prime Minister, my dear brother. Here he is. I see. Older brother. He helped raise me in this thing called public life. Ministers, chairmen, visiting delegates, diplomats, everyone, and MC. Everyone doesn't only want to be from Guyana. Those of you like you come from St. Lucie, Barbados. And there's nothing better than the old Latin saying, res ipsa loquitur, the facts speak for themselves. First, let me express my absolute gratitude to my brother President Ali and to the government and people of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and the Guyana Oil and Gas Energy Chamber of Commerce for the kind invitation to offer these brief remarks this morning, and to have the opportunity also to be able to meet with my colleague, heads of state and government across this conference. But I want, as we do so this morning, to reflect on a few things. Because today we face not one, but several great challenges: the pandemic, the climate crisis, the energy transition to come, and the technology revolution that is engulfing our world. These threaten the fabric of our societies, and they threaten the future of work. Those on the front line of these battles will look upon this period of time in history as perhaps one of the most challenging, disruptive, and impactful, and certainly since our independence as nations. Of the challenges facing our nations, the climate crisis and the energy transition present both threats and opportunities for our region. We must protect our people against the threats while taking absolute advantage of the opportunities afforded to us over the course of the next few decades. Energy, we all know, is integral to our societies. An abundant and affordable supply of energy is essential for meaningful social and economic activity. And to achieve growth in these activities, governments must actively implement policies that will create and incentivize the sustainable use of energy resources. Recalled in the theme of this inaugural conference, CARICOM countries, Caribbean Community countries, have embarked on a mission to chart a sustainable energy future, to navigate the energy transition. My friends, it is tempting, especially for our brothers and sisters who stand atop spectacular new oil and gas resources, to consider that the energy transition is too far off for us to worry about today. But in alliance with our global partners, many of whom are present today, we must also recognize the need to tilt to new circumstances. As a region, we possess bountiful renewable and non-renewable sources, having, like Africa, been blessed by Mother Nature with the power also of the sun, the wind, the water, the earth, oceans, and nature. But as I said earlier, these blessings have always been accompanied by threats. We are a zone of volcanoes and earthquakes. We are on the front line of the war of the climate crisis between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. And our countries are bang, bang, bang in the middle of it. We are more vulnerable to rising temperatures and sea levels than most others. We are vulnerable to floods, as you know well here in Guyana, hurricanes, tsunamis, and drought. And the energy transition that must occur if our world is not quite literally to burn up may well be happening too slowly. But it is a complex conversation, and it is that complex conversation that we must not turn away from. As outlined in our own energy policy in Barbados, we have embarked on an ambitious journey to transition our country to 100% renewable sources and to be a carbon neutral state by 2035. By 2030, 70%, by 2035, 100%. We have one of the densest electric vehicles and charging station networks per capita. There are over 500 electric vehicles on our roads, and remember, we're only 166 square miles. We have one of the region's largest electric fleets of buses, 49 at the moment, with an additional 10 to be purchased. So per capita, we are really ahead of most. We've replaced 88% of all of our street lights across Barbados to LED lights. And we've installed 3.7 megawatts of photovoltaic systems on 22 public buildings and are continuing to move with pace. We've completed ocean energy studies that investigate and establish the feasibility of establishing and developing utility-scale offshore wind and marine power. And we're conscious of the potential for Barbados to generate hydrogen from wave energy and the capacity for export. We're concluding negotiations on a 30-megawatt green energy park based on waste to energy and a substantial improvement in the management of our waste. And last year we concluded our integrated resource and resilience plan. We're redoubling our efforts to propel the industry forward with new fast-track regulatory processes, having discovered the bureaucracy that stymied the pace of the approval of renewable energy projects. We've already approved and installed over 59 megawatts of private renewable energy capacity, primarily solar photovoltaic systems, approximately for 9.4% of what we anticipate to be the need of 625 megawatts because of the absence of progress on battery storage. And we are also conscious that there is a need for us to maximize this solar revolution, particularly as that country in CARICOM that led the way on solar water heaters as we went forward as an independent nation. 50 years ago, we started that process to the point where almost every house in Barbados has been powered by solar water heaters for the generation of hot water for over 4 decades. But the solar revolution and the wind revolution is not just about energy. It's also a golden opportunity to advance economic empowerment and people-centric development, that which remains critical on our journey as independent nations. The sun's power is available to all, as is the wind, as is the ocean. And we must never privatize the sun or the wind or the water just for a few. We are using legislation, policy, and the convening power of government with local financial institutions to ensure that every family home in Barbados can, without large capital expenditures, use attractive feed-in tariffs to deliver a steady income for the home ownership, whether it is new home ownership or existing home ownership. I say so because we hope in the next few years to build 10,000 homes, low and lower middle income, affordable homes, where persons can purchase solar voltaic panels on their roofs to help them offset the costs and in some instances to de-risk them, making them eligible for mortgages that they would not otherwise be eligible for. Their rooftops give them the hope of being homeowners. And indeed, the name of the program for us is Home Ownership Providing Energy. But to do that only for new homeowners would be unfair. And therefore, we intend to ensure that of the 80,000 households, that the majority of them be also given an opportunity to be able to have the solar panels on their roofs through appropriate financing mechanisms with credit unions and banks, and to allow them to be able to benefit from the bounty. We asked our people to share in the burden of adjustment a few years ago, and we remain obligated that those who share the burden of adjustment must equally share in the bounty that is there to benefit all. Barbados is very keen to share and collaborate with the rest of our Caribbean brothers and sisters in CARICOM to create a global brand in resilience building and planning, renewables and sustainability. And we're conscious that small states like Dominica have already started on that journey, and that as a Caribbean region we need to work together, because more than any other region we are in a position to tell the world about resilience and what resilience means and looks like, and how that brand can be used to unlock opportunities for further development. As we look forward to a sustainable energy future, we also equally understand that there's substantial hydrocarbon resources deep below our seabed. In November 2021, BHP completed a 2,700 square kilometer 3D seismic survey within 2 offshore blocks under the terms of its exploration licenses. These surveys will help Barbados de-risk exploration and hopefully will lead to the discovery of hydrocarbon resources offshore. In particular, we hope natural gas, which we still see as a potential bridge in the energy transition. That is only 2 of the blocks, but we have a number of other blocks that have been there, and were it not for the pandemic, we would have moved forward with greater alacrity to recognize that the transitioning has to be carefully managed. The conversations have to be carefully had. Barbados is therefore looking at ways of accelerating the launch of new offshore oil and gas blocks later this year, recognizing that there is a need for us to be able to make decisions as to what we do. And this has not been an easy discussion, but it is one, like many of you have said, and I've listened carefully to those who have spoken this morning as well, who clearly reflect on the fact that, like with most things in life, we are not a single issue people or a single issue nation. And the complexity of the conversation requires maturity and requires a commitment to frankness. We are people who have been the victims of colonization and exploitation. Regrettably, in the efforts to close the gap, what we have done is to perpetuate the disparity. If we are to remove that disparity and offer to the people of the world the opportunity to live in peace and in hope of bountiful futures, then it requires difficult conversations that do not perpetuate the inequity of the world of 1945. For that is what we have done. When the world determined that the 2 great wars were over and that we needed to secure the future and prosperity and safety of the world's population, they gave everyone the right to be declared equal in the eyes of the law. But equality in the eyes of the law without appropriate reparations or compensatory factors simply perpetuated the inequity. We face a similar moment today with respect to energy stability, security, and development in this transition. And what you hear is not a determination that we should abandon the inconvenient truths. What you hear is a determination that we should talk through the inconvenient truths. Similarly, our world is matched by a failure to appreciate what we mean when we say net zero. We have a climate crisis. There is no 2 ways about it. And we must fight to ensure that that climate crisis does not make migrants of us all. But at the same time, net zero does not mean no fossil fuels. Net zero means that we have to produce enough to offset the impact of the fossil fuels. And to that extent, the mix that the International Energy Association sees at 80% today of fossil fuels to 20% of non flips by 2050 to 20% fossil fuels. The question is, who should provide that 20% fossil fuels? Will the world make the same mistake of 1945? Or will the world accept that equity demands of us now and respect demands of us conversations that allow those whose poverty has been cemented by centuries of extraction and exploitation by a few to catch up with those whose per capita income is multiple times that found in Ghana and Guyana and Suriname and Barbados and others? Or will the world just simply ignore the reality of that disparity and perpetuate a hypocrisy that regrettably has become too familiar with our condition as people across this world? We say that the world needs global, moral, strategic leadership. And I say so conscious that the absence of that leadership means that it is okay for a few advanced countries to continue to provide the 20% that will be needed in 2050, while at the same time refusing to accept the responsibility of financing the consequences of the climate crisis for those of us who are on the front line of the climate crisis, for those of us who are already feeling the pain of drought and hurricanes and floods. We say that the time has come for leadership at the global level to frankly discuss these issues, because there are consequences to real people and to countries. And to simply believe that it can be a vanilla type conversation that is one issue is to ignore our reality as human beings at the personal level, at the country level, and at the international level. We are complex creatures and we face complex challenges, and hence difficult conversations must be had. I want to ask us today to reflect on a few things, because we are at that stage, as I said, where there are inconvenient truths. And I've tried to hone in on them. And I've tried to ask us to strike the balance between the need to face the reality of saving our world, but equally to face the reality of providing for our people. We cannot save the earth and sacrifice our people. And regrettably for some, that is the simple equation or the simple proposition, because it's easy to put in a soundbite or in 4 inches of a newspaper. But our lives cannot be reduced to a soundbite or 4 inches of column in a newspaper. What is required of us now is to have the kinds of complex conversations, and I thank you, President Daly, for your initiative in creating a forum such as this that will allow us to begin to say to the rest of the world, we actually see what is going on, and we don't agree with it. And we actually recognize that the commitment to be able to change a narrative without understanding and appreciating the realities of countries such as ours, faced with the crisis of the climate, but faced with the complexity of poverty of our people and the lack of opportunities, that there must be a way that can be found that can meet both needs. I trust and pray that as we go forward, that we will find the will as heads of government and heads of state to force these conversations. And I want us, as we do so, to recognize that there may be a few initiatives that truly can be transformative. But before I get there, I want to just offer one comment on this issue of local content. Because I've heard too many people, particularly from the private sector, complain regionally and internationally, and not just about Guyana, but in every country, in our own country, about the need for local content. The day that we do not provide opportunity for our citizens who participate in active citizenship, of being able to benefit from the patrimony of our country, is the day we sow the seeds of destruction of our nation and invite disruption. We will have difficult conversations as well in CARICOM, and we must. But those conversations recognize that in every country there are even regional and local conflicts and disagreements. And it is our duty to be able to smooth that over, but to ensure that at no stage as newly independent countries of the world do we leave our citizens as tenants in their own land, but make them owners. It is against the backdrop of the complexity of these discussions that I want to leave you with a few concepts. And Barbados has been thinking about this, because we believe that we should propose an accord among the new energy exporters to invest more than 10%, but at least 10% of net revenues in renewable energy. We do not, as President Allo said, we do not have the capacity to easily finance our development in the transition. And we've not been given the assurances, not even in adaptation funding, that we can get it. You're asking us to make a journey, having already recognized the fact that countries were left at the point of independence without a development compact, without the ability to bring about stability or access to education, health, housing, and the normal development trajectories captured in the Sustainable Development Goals. We were never nothing. We start then to compete globally, and we're told in the WTO that there can be no special and differential treatment for small states. And we then see the destruction of domestic production in agriculture and manufacturing over the course of the last 30 years since its establishment. We were then told after 9/11 that we needed to make sure that we could reduce the flow of terrorism financing and to reduce the opportunities for money laundering, for which we're all committed. But the consequences of the regulatory framework for us was to impose significant costs and to reduce further fiscal space. The complicated scenarios of development have added to the debt that we carry. But the greatest contributors to that debt, as we are now learning through research, have been the natural disaster crises that we've had to face over and over and over. The G20 countries produce 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and many of them are still some of the biggest beneficiaries of oil and gas revenues. We have reached a point where global discussion must now address these issues as to how we transition. If we can put, therefore, a significant percentage of that revenue, at least 10 to 15%, in a fund to finance renewable energy, while ensuring that our citizens are also beneficiaries of that renewable energy compact, then I believe we will advance the discussion. In addition, we should commit to investing in a new international exchange of renewable energy investments. Projects listed there must meet minimum environmental, social, governance standards, local content, and local ownership conditions. A single place for dedicated investors and common minimum standards will ignite investment and growth. And for our entrepreneurs, literally, opportunity and diversity, and drawing new investors and entrepreneurs that hitherto would not have been there. My country is already the world's largest issuer of sovereign securities with natural disaster clauses. We hope others will join us, but like this conversation, it has been a difficult conversation when it ought not to be, because if a natural disaster occurs, the chances of default are very, very high. Whereas if you have clauses that determine what happens before the natural disaster happens, then it ought to de-risk and reduce the cost of capital. But regrettably, I suspect people do not want the cost of capital reduced. And hence, their stubborn refusal to accept natural disaster clauses as a way of de-risking that cost. We are equally in Barbados, one of the sub-region's largest international financial centers, and we have the necessary fiscal and regulatory regimes there. Given that we are later and smaller in the hydrocarbon business, maybe Barbados's critical contribution now is to develop an international neutral exchange for regional renewable investments. We have already seen in our country a separate initiative with the issuance of green bonds. I hope that we can take advantage of the geography-busting power and to ensure that we work not just in our region, but with our friends across the Atlantic as we reclaim our Atlantic destiny, such as our brother from Ghana and others. On a separate initiative, equally, I've asked Professor Prasad to lead for us on the establishment of a green investment bank. And we are hoping to work not just with the Green Climate Fund, but with other financiers, because this region needs banking solutions that are appropriate to our needs rather than those that are determined by risk advisors who sit thousands of miles away and who have no concept of why we need access to finance and what we will do with that finance appropriately and judiciously. So my friends, for many reasons, and as a result of the opportunity given to us today, I've come here today to ask the world to pause and to have that complex conversation. This in no way removes from us the obligation of averting the climate crisis, but it is a recognition that net zero does not mean zero. Net zero means a limited amount. And the question is, who shall participate globally in that limited amount? Shall it be only those who had the opportunity before? Or shall we for once recognize that this world needs global, moral, strategic leadership that includes the people of the world and does not seek to exclude in a way in which we did in 1945 when we settled the arrangements for the United Nations? I trust and pray, President Ali, that your leadership on this matter will cause many of us across the globe to sit up and to come to the table to have these discussions, and that thereafter that we communicate them to our people, not limited by that soundbite or 4 inches of column space, but fueled by the reality that our people too can understand complex issues and complex conversations. And for us to believe otherwise would be to perpetuate the attitude of those who came before and who believed that we were just to watch and to be victims rather than to be participants and framers of our own future. I wish you all the very best, truly, not just in the staging of this inaugural conference, but I believe that your country, Guyana, our country, Caribbean country, Guyana, has endured much, And you cannot move from being a highly indebted poor country to where you are today without being given the opportunity, one, to bring along your people who have suffered the indignity of that poverty for decades, but secondly, without being given the opportunity to participate globally in discussions that will affect your ability to manage the development of your people. And I trust and pray that this conference will trigger that international conversation. Thank you, and God bless.